Before the video starts, I'd like to say that this is an extremely serious talk that talks about suicidal thoughts and homicidal thoughts. So if you don't want to hear about that and you think that could maybe make you feel unhappy or it could distress you, this absolutely is not the video to watch. I think this was probably a very sensible decision for me to put a disclaimer first, because I don't want people going into the deep end without there being any sort of warning. So if you think that you'd want to watch a video like this to be able to work through your sorts of issues in which you think you've had suicidal and or homicidal thoughts, then if you think that you feel comfortable with watching this video because you want to work through those thoughts, or you just want to watch it because you have an interest in learning about the mindset that people have when it comes to those sorts of thoughts or anything else, then okay, all right. But if you think that it's distressing at any moment in which you think you're not going to be able to come back from, and you think the short-term discomfort is too heavy, then please, for your own sake, please don't watch the video. I can't make you not watch it, and I can't make you watch it either. But that's the warning, and this is the best that I can do. Anyway, here is the video. There's much more that I want to talk about, so I think I'm going to make a part 2 to it. But anyway, this is it. I'd like to also mention a couple of other things. If you've ever had these sorts of thoughts in the past, that's okay. But it absolutely is not okay to act on them. And I'll tell you what, now that I've used this video to work through it, I now treat people differently. And when it comes to, and I'm talking about my dad in particular, I'm now treating him a lot more differently, and I'm speaking to him in a lot more of a friendly way because of working through these issues. But again, if you've had those thoughts, it's not going to be helpful if you beat yourself up about it, but instead get curious, which is something that I talk about in the video. But again, just get curious about it and think, where could this have come from? What sort of music am I listening to? What sort of movies am I watching that talks about these sorts of things and they glorify it? What sort of things am I watching? Am I watching movies in which there are a lot of people being murdered? Am I listening to a lot of music in which people talk about that sort of stuff? Like, what am I watching? But again, I'd just like to say to anyone out there that's having these sorts of thoughts and they don't want to, and they feel uncomfortable with watching the rest of the video, I'd say, if you've had those sorts of thoughts, it's okay. But it is not okay to put those thoughts into action and to act them out. That is not okay. Anyway, if you feel comfortable with watching the rest of the video, this is it, and this is going to start from now. I'm going to start this episode off by talking about something which I just could not shrug off my mind last night and this morning, both when I woke up and when I was having a shower. So let's talk about it. So it's about suicide/homicide, right? This came into this sort of thought about speaking of this topic, or topic should I say, came into my mind after seeing a Jordan Green video a Jordan Green thumbnail of him talking about his suicide attempt, and also a Keltia O'Connor video talking about her thumbnail of her talking about her suicidal attempt. And I looked at the emotion on their faces in the thumbnail, and I started to have thoughts of, is suicide a very emotional process? Is that what leads them to wanting to commit suicide? Is that what leads them to wanting to do that? The topic got me interested, and then it eventually led to me thinking about my own life, thinking about examples of which I've had thoughts, impulsive thoughts, that are similar. When it comes to suicide, the furthest I've ever gone is having impulsive thoughts. I remember at least one visualization of me jumping out of the bedroom window. But it was a light thought. It wasn't something that I was genuinely considering, like, oh, yes, okay, today is the day that I end it. No, that wasn't how I was thinking. But it did go as far as me thinking, am I genuinely considering this? But for me personally, that's as far as it's gone. Even though this may be a topic to talk about that's uncomfortable in the short term, I'd absolutely want to talk about it because I've worked through short-term discomfort before and it's okay. Not only that, but I'm thinking of the bigger picture. In the future, many people are going to be able to listen to this. They're going to know about me, and many people will be able to listen to my message. And I want to use this video to be able to help people work through similar thoughts that they have about suicide and or homicide. So that was the suicidal thoughts, impulsive suicidal thoughts that I've had. And now I want to talk about the other end of the spectrum, which I don't really see many people talking about, but I have in the past had an impulsive thought about homicide, about killing someone that wasn't me. And that someone, in fact, I feel in the short term, I feel very uncomfortable saying this, but at the end of the day, it's these suicidal thoughts and homicidal thoughts is one thing. Acting on them is another. And I absolutely did not in any way, shape or form act on these thoughts. Let me just tell you that now. I absolutely did not act on these thoughts. I want to make that clear because I'm not someone that would want to go out and kill myself, nor am I someone that would want to go out and put other people's health at risk. But anyway, the person that I had thoughts of doing this to was in fact my dad, and maybe in a way myself, not through suicide, but I mean via the emotional side of things. So let me talk about it. So this, I had a visualization of, oh my gosh, the short-term discomfort I'm feeling, because it's like, do I want to put this on the internet? But at the end of the day, long term, this is going to be able to help people, and I want to use it in that way. I'm absolutely, I'm not advising suicidal thoughts. I'm absolutely not encouraging suicidal thoughts, nor am I encouraging homicidal thoughts. I absolutely am not doing that, and I don't want to make it seem like I am. But yeah, I've had thoughts. No, not thoughts. Sorry, just the one thought of shooting my dad with a pistol. I clearly visualized shooting him whilst he was sitting down watching TV in the front room with mum to the right of him. But I didn't visualize hearing the bang, nor did I visualize hearing mum or any other family member scream, nor did I even think of police coming to the scene with cars and hearing their sirens and seeing their beacons coming to park directly outside the driveway. And I didn't visualize me struggling as they were putting me in cuffs, nor did I visualize me going to jail. Nor did I visualize me seeing him dead with his brain splattered all over the couch, with his forehead burst completely open due to the force of the bullet. I absolutely have not given a warning, but this is very, very, very deep, and I'll put a disclaimer of some sort that if you can't handle this, now is the time to click off, and I'll put timestamps so that it's easier for people to be able to skip if they don't want to hear about such things. So yeah, Anyway, I think at first glance, when it comes to the homicidal thought in particular, it's like, what the hell? What have you gone through to be able to get to that place? But I've been thinking about it last night, and I really believe it makes sense. I I believe I know exactly where the connection is, or at least where the core connection is. And that was to the music that I was listening to at the time. I was listening to grime music back then, and the lyrics were very, very violent, talking about the same sort of things, but doing it onto other people, shooting people, shanking people, hurting people. But back then I didn't make the connection. But yesterday and last night, as I gave myself time to think, I visualized lyrics of some grime music that I've listened to in the past, and then it's those sort of visualizations that I could see from the lyrics that I heard were extremely similar to that homicidal thought that I had of shooting my dad. So to me, it makes complete sense. It wasn't just that, of course, and I'm going to get into that right now. But to me, that's where I believe the connection is. Or no, sorry, I believe that's where one of the core connections are. And now I've got a whole load of other things and reasons why I think it got to that point. I think I've been, even when I didn't realise it, I've been an extremely, extremely strong character mentally, because it took me years of listening to that sort of music to have even one thought of it. It took me at least 4 years for me to finally break and have a visualization of it, instead of just hearing the lyrics and then putting it away. So other than that grime music talking about I'm going to shoot you and I'm going to shank you, I think there are many other reasons. But before I get into them, I want to speak about just that, very generally speaking. And that, to me, is what sort of things are you voluntarily putting in your head? If you're listening to violent things, just like how I did, you best expect violent thoughts. You best expect them. You better expect them. It only makes sense. That's what you're voluntarily allowing yourself to listen to. That's what you're voluntarily allowing yourself to consume. So listening to listening to the violent thoughts of other people that they display in their music or in other ways, like talking about it, and that expect yourself to have violent thoughts, just like how I did. I didn't make that connection back then, but now, after visualizing those grime lyrics, it makes sense. But I think it's not the only reason, but it's a core reason, because they, in their lyrics, talk about shooting people and shanking people. So let's move on to other reasons why I think it got to that point. Resentment and frustration to both myself and my parents, and potentially my other family members. So I believe that this was a part of it, because I wasn't unleashing my full potential. Back then in school times, I wanted to do school and get a job, and I kept on asking my parents for years on end, from about 15 to 18 or 16 to 18, and they kept on saying no. And I didn't know how to deal with that. After those sorts of conversations over and over and over again over the span of years, I just stew. I didn't know how to let it go. I didn't know how to let those thoughts release, because I didn't talk to anyone about it. Because I didn't think, this is quote unquote the thought pathway I had at the time, I didn't think I was being listened to. And I've now made a new point of view about it at the time, which I've written down, which is, I didn't believe my point of view was being considered, as I was always being told no when I asked to get a job along with doing school work back then. Or perhaps I thought of this way, I didn't think I was being listened to back then. That's what I'm talking about. As I wasn't hearing what I wanted to hear, them saying yes. Little did I know, it's only up to me to be able to put that work in, and the only person's permission I need to be able to do what I truthfully want to do is mine. And it made me think of certain grime lyrics talking about murdering people again. And I really think that those music lyrics, were a main core part of where it comes from. It's just something that I did onto myself. I could have controlled that. But the reason why I was listening to grime music in the first place, why I initially started listening to it, was because I thought it was cool. That was my thought pathway. But back in those times, I was listening to people that weren't violent. But then deeper down the rabbit hole, I went over the span of years. Then it got more violent and more violent and more violent and more violent as I kept on finding new things and mindlessly consuming YouTube, allowing those sorts of people to put agendas in my head of murdering people and that. Don't get me wrong. Again, I just want to point out, when it comes to suicidal and homicidal thoughts, it's one thing to think it, but it's another to even in the slightest act on it. Don't do that. Suicide and or homicide should not be the answer, ever. That was what KSI said when he was talking about suicide, but I just like to repeat that same thing because I agree with that point of view. You shouldn't be feeling so much. Please don't allow yourself to feel so much frustration to the point where you think murder, whether it be murdering yourself or murdering someone else or other people, is the right thing to do, or is the main solution that you have to go about things. It's not. When I had that thought, the homicidal thought, I felt so awful after it. How could I think of doing that to my dad? But it makes sense now because of what I was listening to, the resentment and frustration that I had of me not unleashing my full potential, and also the fear that I had towards dad. I remember when I'm making the notes of this, I remember all of the times, even recently, of him shouting at me and giving me that negative feedback loop, which I allowed to affect me on an emotional level, to the point where, as I've spoken about in previous videos, where I've frozen up in one conversation in which he slammed the table. He was talking about me not eating, even though I was eating very little. I just wanted to eat when I wanted to eat. That was it, really. But it got very serious because they thought I wasn't eating at all, when in reality I was. But to them, it seemed back then, it seemed like they had to see me eating in order for them to know that I was eating, which is quite strange. That's quite a childish way of thinking, honestly, because babies think, okay, if he's not here, then it's not happening. If my dad's not here, then my dad's gone, disappeared. Like, he doesn't exist. But that's just not true at all. But yeah, going back to it. So when it came to the fear and me freezing up in conversations and feeling resentment towards him and mum, but not as much to mum, I could have had a potential want for revenge to get back at him for all the fear that I've allowed myself to feel because of what he said to me in the past and how I felt when he spoke about certain things, like him having a dark side. Going back to the music now, I think what captivated me was because I was feeling the same way on some sort of level. I was feeling a similar, not the same, but a similar sort of anger and resentment and just frustration at life because I wasn't unleashing my full potential. I think that's what could have captivated me without realising it. And because I didn't realise it at the time, it just further captivated me because I didn't know what was going on in my mind. So let's talk about another reason as to why I think I had the thought. Even though in my head, even at this point, it makes sense. But I'm going to carry on going because I do have more reasons. I think I could have allowed myself to build an inferiority complex towards him as well. That may have wanted me to get back at him and have revenge at him somehow. Because I've not only had thoughts of shooting him. I have had, no, not thoughts, sorry, one thought. I've also had thoughts of putting my hands on him as well, even though I haven't. I absolutely have not, and I absolutely do not encourage dysfunctional relationships. But this is my reality, and even though short term it may be uncomfortable, long term this will be able to help people, because people out there listening genuinely could be in a suicidal mental state, and I'd absolutely want to put out a message to say that it's okay. It won't be beneficial to you if you beat yourself up about it, but it's more than normal to think, what the hell have I just thought? In my opinion, because that's you coming back to normal. Like, I'm thinking of homeostasis. Like, you've gone so low, you're thinking, what the hell is this thought I've just had? So that's allowed you to go to raise your levels up and not be so low anymore. And then from there, you work through it. But it's okay. It's okay to have those. It absolutely isn't healthy. But if you have those sorts of thoughts, there's no point beating yourself up about it. I'd instead give the advice to get curious. I'd give people the advice to get curious and see, just like how I have, where could it have come from? Instead of shaming and stigmatizing these sorts of talks like suicide and homicide, having these thoughts, instead of stigmatizing it and thinking, oh, you're crazy if you had these thoughts. Instead get curious. Think about where could this have come from? I wonder. I'm not usually like this. I absolutely do not usually think about that at all 24/7, even though back then I was listening to music that talked about shanking and shooting people. But I am not like that. And I understand that. So I wonder, where has it come from? If you get curious, one, and two, like I've preached before in the past, you give yourself time to think in the evening, mate, you're forced to be reckoned with, because you've given yourself time to be able to think through your issues. And if you give yourself time to think and you put all technology outside of the room where you're sleeping, outside of your bedroom, that is just, mate, that is a recipe for amazingness. Like, you're going to be at the top. You're on the way of just improving yourself and growing as a person. Like, the way you're going to be able to grow over the long period of time when you give yourself time to think and write things down. That's just the path. That's just the path to greatness, whatever greatness may be for you. But when it comes to thinking about these sorts of things, I absolutely would not say beating yourself up about it. Like, why did I have this thought? Oh my gosh, I don't want this thought to happen again. That's just not going to help. You can go through that way, but it's not going to help. So I'd instead say, get curious. Because I'd assume people out there don't usually think like that. Don't usually think of suicide. Don't usually think of homicide. So I'd said, where could it have come? So instead think, where could it have come from? What sort of things am I listening to on a daily basis? What sort of environment am I in? Which I think is another reason why I had that single thought. Because I was listening to grime music, people were saying, I'm going to shoot you, I'm going to shank you for years on end. And when I visualized it, those sorts of words were very similar to the thought. Not only that, but I believe that I was in a very toxic environment back then at home, a lot more than it is now. For example, there were many arguments between my parents and my sisters, within my sisters, my parents arguing with me and my sisters arguing with me, and potentially both my parents and sisters arguing with me. It was a very toxic environment. Not only that, but there was a very, very little space in the house for all of us. Like, very, very little. Every evening I could hear family members talk. Even when I had my room closed, when I had my bedroom door closed, I could still hear my sister talk as the her bedroom was, or their bedroom, I should say, was closest to mine, and then I also remember being able to hear my parents talk as well. So with that in mind, I think that was one of the reasons why I could have had that thought, because I wasn't experiencing peace. My mind was not at peace. I allowed myself to be mentally traumatized, although I couldn't really do anything about there being too little space for all of us. So yeah, I think because of the environment, I wasn't ever truthfully experiencing peace, or at least on a daily basis. That combined with listening to people saying, I'm going to shoot you and I'm going to shank you for years on end, along with that anger and resentment being relatable to my own anger due to not unleashing my full potential. And also, I may not have talked about it before, but the inferiority that I may have experienced, the inferiority complex I may have experienced by dad, by allowing myself to experience, by dad telling me things like, I'm the parent, you're the child, over and over and over again. But there's only so long in which a child could take that before they just start thinking unhealthy thoughts, which I didn't actually think of back then. My thought process was extremely underdeveloped because I didn't give myself time to think things through, which in fact could have been another part as to why I had that thought. Now that I think about it, I didn't give myself time to think things through. Therefore, the resentment just built and built and built and built instead of me getting out of it, and instead of me unleashing my full potential, which is what I'm doing now. I'm not going to feel ungrateful that I didn't, because there's a lesson to be learned from it. Not only that, but now helping people in real life, and both in real life and also through the channel. I really, absolutely, if I could be the person that stops someone from committing a suicide or committing a homicide, that would be such an amazing feeling, man. Because as I said, it's okay if you've had those sorts of thoughts. It's okay, seriously, but it's not okay to act on them. It absolutely is not okay to act on those sorts of thoughts. But if you've had them, it's okay. Just, there's no point beating yourself up about it. Just think, where could it have come from? Where could this have come from? And then you'll eventually get your answer, trust me, just like how I have. Short term, it may be uncomfortable thinking about it, but now I can release this constructively. I can now release it constructively to other people, and for them to be able to, if they're in a suicidal mental state or in a homicidal mental state, by having thoughts of doing it and being on the way to genuinely considering it and putting those plans into action, then that would be amazing. If I could help people work through sorts of things, that would be absolutely amazing. And I'm going to do it through videos like this. I am doing it through this video. And I feel grateful long term now. Well, I absolutely will feel grateful years from now from being able to say this and having the courage to be able to talk through my experiences of this. Not only that, but in a calm way, being able to think about it and explain myself rationally, instead of potentially tearing other people down who are in a similar mind state, thinking, I want to do this, and then they're thinking, I've been wanting to do it as well, and then they're just further on the path to self-destruction and self-murder, or potentially murdering other people. Not actual murder, I mean murder. But yeah, I feel so grateful that I've been able to talk about this from calmly and from a rational perspective, because I've been able to do this by thinking it through. But I feel grateful for this because I can now speak about it constructively and help people out there with this calm way of thinking and with this very developed way of thinking through all of the reasons as to why I could have had that thought. For me personally, going back to the suicidal thought visualization now, it didn't go far. But for me, the homicidal thought was very, very, very deep-rooted, much more deep-rooted than I knew back in those days. And honestly, it happened last year. That thought happened last year, and I remember myself very, very, very clearly sitting in the middle of the sofa in the front room. Where I very ironically thought of having that thought. No, where I very ironically had that thought. I was there sitting down thinking, okay, this, there needs to be change. I didn't think there needs to be serious change, but that was implied when I said that. I didn't think, by that I mean I didn't use those exact words. But yeah, I knew serious changes needed to come about when having that thought. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Now that I've spoken about it, it's just one massive thing off my chest. Which is, I'm not saying this to try and make people think that I'm a crazy individual and that. Again, if you've had those thoughts, it's okay. But it's not okay to act on them. Alright. I'm now going to change the topic and talk about something else. Oh, actually no, before I do, I'd like to say, give yourself, if you've ever had these sorts of thoughts, or regardless of whether you have or haven't, give yourself the time to think. In the evening, at least give yourself hours to think, where you put your technology all the way out of the room and you just give yourself a pen and pad. If you want to, you can read, you can do anything else you want, but you cannot have the screens in the room. And if you do that, trust me, you'll be able to constructively, or you're in a place where you'll much more likely be able to constructively work through those sorts of thoughts. And also you'll be able to vent to yourself about things in general that aren't homicidal thoughts or suicidal thoughts, and that will just allow you to unleash your full potential, just like how it's doing for me now. But okay, I'm now going to move on to talking about something else. I'm going to talk about someone that I've met in the gym. So we've exchanged phone numbers, and he said that he didn't mind me using his real name, but I mind, because it just doesn't sit right with me. I don't want to be able to talk about people using their real names for privacy reasons. So I've come to a compromise, and I've decided that we agreed that we'll call him Cause. And I want to talk about a serious conversation that we had about starting a channel similar to what I've started. Alright, that's the main clip done. That was me talking for 29 minutes and 21 seconds straight in the morning. That was me talking for 30 seconds less than half an hour straight on this thought. It did help I had my pad with me and my developed thoughts with me. But I'll tell you what, as I said in the start of the video at the disclaimer, because now I've let this go, I'm already treating my dad differently. I'm already doing that, and I'm already speaking to him in a friendly way. So I'm telling you from personal experience, this is what's worked for me. And if you're someone that's had similar thoughts to me in the past, or even or you're having them now, I'd say, and if you're having these thoughts now, and or you've had them in the past, and you've still felt comfortable watching this video, especially if you did it in its entirety, all the fucking power to you. All the power to you for pushing through and watching this video and pushing through your short-term discomfort. All the fucking power to you. Seriously, man. You don't understand how strong a character you are for being able to do this, for thinking, okay, I've had these sorts of thoughts. This guy's talking about them. Let's work through them. I want to tell you that you are a stronger person than you think you are. You are a much more mentally stronger person than you probably think you are, and that you believe you are at first glance. I was. And look where I'm at now. I've worked through it, and now I'm treating my dad in a much more friendly way because I don't have that resentment towards him. I've now been able to work through this. And all the power to you for searching for for knowledge that you can use and apply it in your life to be able to work through your problems. All the power to you. suicide and or homicide should absolutely not be the answer. And if you believe you need to speak to someone like a family and or friend or friends or family members about this, someone you trust and someone you believe does not have ill will against you, do it. Absolutely do it. That's probably one of the best things that you could do. Talking to someone else other than yourself could be a way to process your emotions and your fears and your resentment and your anger and your frustration. It would allow you to channel it through somebody else's perspective. You'd be able to work through it by having somebody else's perspective to guide you and to help you. So I'd say if you're ever having those thoughts, have had them in the past and or having them now, please work through them. And if you believe you need to get help, work through them. Please work through them. I absolutely cannot control your actions, and I'm not going to make myself believe that I can do that. At the end of the day, how you want to go about this, whether it be through unhealthy means or healthy means, like working through it, that at the end of the day is up to you. But I will say this, I've worked through mine and I feel relieved, very, very, very relieved. I could feel that burden coming off my chest, and I'd certainly say from experience that working through it, and if you needed somebody else's help to work through it, then that's the best decision that you could ever make. But what I did to work through it is give myself in the evening time to think with no technology in the room for hours. From the time I want to go to bed all the way up until in the middle of my morning routine, rinsing my eyes, getting ready for the plank journey and so on. But yeah, that's it. That's the end of the video. If you were having these thoughts and you push through it, all the power to you, man. You don't realize how strong a character you are mentally. You don't. You probably don't. And you probably have absolutely not a clue of how mentally strong a person you are. But I just say the best thing that you can do is work through it. Give yourself time in the evening to think. Every evening, without fail, you give yourself time in the evening to think, from the time you want to go to bed all the way until you're in the middle of your morning routine. That will make you a force to be reckoned with. I'm telling you from personal experience, even after doing it for a few days. But that's it. That's the end of the video. If you watched, all the power to you, man. All the power to you. Well done for pushing through and watching this video, which could be very uncomfortable for some people. But yeah, that's it. Please take care of yourselves out there, man. And please give yourself some time or a platform, something, an outlet to be able to mentally release all of that frustration that you've built up inside you over years. Please give yourself that outlet to be able to, just as a way of respecting yourself. Give yourself that outlet, man. For me, this is it. To be able to release my thoughts here. This right here is my outlet. And this, I know from experience, from even right now, this is what works for me. And I'd advise people to not only give themselves time in the evening to think, with no screens that they'd use being in the room, but I'd also advise people to give their own, to make their own platform, like a YouTube channel, for example, to release these thoughts on a daily basis. Every single day. You can't have anything pent up inside you. That is what's going to allow you to grow. That is what's going to allow you to have long-term comfort, self-respect, and just mental peace, mental clarity, and also an amazing body and an amazing life. Peace.